David Griffin promised you changes on this Pelicans roster after last year's roster fell short. And it made sense why they kind of stayed status quo last year, because you hadn't really gotten a full look at what this piece could do together when relatively healthy. Well, you got that look last year, and there was a lot of good. However, there was a bit too much of spinning of the wheels. And although I loved him, Jonas Valanciunas has officially moved on. He has signed a 3-year, $30 million deal with the Washington Wizards. And again, I want to reinforce this. I really, really loved Jonas during these 3 years in New Orleans. He was a key part of a team that I believe, even though the end of the season results did vary a bit in terms of how far you got when you look at the regular season wins and how good of a day-to-day team you were. He was a key part of a team that got better each year over the course of 3 years. And to be clear, one of the best parts is durable. A team that is been defined by injuries, it feels like, for the last 10 years in so many different ways. Jonas Valanciunas missed 11 games in 3 years. I appreciate that level of workmanship, that level of durability, of toughness. It's not to say that he just was never hurt, didn't feel good. Like, no, he just played through it all. For 3 years, put his body on the line for the Pellies. And again, it is much appreciated. But at the same time, there were some key statistics. One of, was the rim protection just was not there, wasn't exactly fitting in with Zion and company. And you don't really need offensive production from a center necessarily. Before we get into the big trade that broke Friday afternoon right at the end of Tay-Tay's AFR, Najee Marshall has also officially moved on. A 3-year deal with the Dallas Mavericks. Great pickup for the Mavs, in my opinion here. A team that obviously coming off of a finals run, knows they have the main pieces, now kind of looking to build around the edges. Bit of a meat and potatoes pick here. Najee Marshall, who, remember, one of the Pelicans' great UDFAs here. Najee Marshall, though, is kind of one of those ultimate glue guys that every team needs, right? Just an absolute grinder, great attitude, great defensively, shoots well from three, seems to make big plays when you need him. One of those kind of second team leaders that when you put him in for those few minutes when he gets his opportunity, again, holds the rope, sometimes advances the rope. I hate to see the Pelicans lose him. I'll be interested to see how they replace him. Again, this is not like replacing a superstar where you're going to look at like the raw statistical output. Well, how am I gonna replace Najee Marshall's points and rebounds per game and everything? I don't really care about that. I more wonder how you're going to replace Najee Marshall's kind of work ethic and where he fit in that locker room and the intensity and energy that he brought to that second unit. However, you may accuse me of burying the lead here, and you would be right, because the biggest news is something that Taylor alluded to at the beginning of AFR on Saturday or Friday, excuse me, and help me out. So you'll talk about it at the beginning, and then by the end of the show, it had become official, correct?
Yeah. So, I was just kind of recapping what they did in the NBA draft, first round, second round with Messi and Reeves, and I was like, hey,
Mr. Messi,
if you're looking for a point guard, Trae Young's name was mentioned, but I brought up the fact that I thought DeJounte Murray was a lot better fit than Trae Young was, and with about 5 minutes left in the show, Pelicans traded for DeJounte Murray.
Yep. And so the Pelicans end up signing Larry Nance Jr., Dyson Daniels, E.J. Liddell, and 2 first-round picks for DeJounte Murray. And you now have your lead guard. We'll talk about fit more in a minute here. First, let's look at the pieces you give up. Larry Nance Jr., again, this is kind of a culture guy to lose, which sucks. Great locker room guy, great culture guy. Another man who had some really bright moments in New Orleans. Of course, I'll always remember Scary Larry in that Clippers play-in game from a couple of years ago where he was dominant and he helps the playoffs eventually, the Pelicans push into the first round against the Suns. They were exciting. But when an all-star is up for grabs a two-time All-Star that was both an All-Star in San Antonio and in Atlanta. Well, there are pieces you're going to have to give up. And if you're telling me your backup center is one of them, I'm going to tell you, okay, we'll find a way to replace the culture impact. Dyson Daniels is a very exciting player to me. Great length, great defense, learning to shoot threes, young, super high ceiling. However, when you look at all of the Pelicans' young pieces, be it Herb, Trey, as much as I like Daniels, he was the most movable. And again, the AD trade continues to pay dividends as that first-round pick, not exactly the most attractive, but now packaged in a deal. This is, again, one of the Lakers' picks, one of the two first-round picks you're giving up for an all-star. And how rare is it to get an all-star without giving up one in return, without even giving up a starter in return, in fact. And an all-star on a good contract. He's making about $26 million a year for the next 2 years. And he's getting, and he has a player option after that. Now, if he continues to play at this level, I imagine he'll deny that and want to get extended big. But if it's going well, great, then extend him, right? Pelicans are one of only two teams in the NBA not to pay the luxury tax. So this feels, to me, this feels like a bit of a home run deal for the Pels. You didn't give up any major assets. You got a 27-year-old reigning all-star in his physical prime who is ready to win now. It addresses a point of need. You know, your main ball handler. As much as I love Point Zion, DeJounte Murray probably works out better once you get the chemistry down in terms of making this all work. And he's going to be asked to do more of what he did in San Antonio and be more of a setup and facilitator than maybe he was asked to do in Atlanta, where he became more of a scorer. Also, DeJounte Murray, an elite defensive player. In 21-22, led the NBA in steals. The Pelicans, under Willie Green, have been an elite defensive team, finished in top 6 over the last 2 seasons. I mean, it's really been, there are times last year when the Pelicans were at their best last year, it's when you just felt their length. Like everybody could play it. Now, granted, Dyson Daniels was part of that, but this long positionless defense where everybody could D up everybody. And Zion was garbage at first, but Zion doubled down, committed, and got to be a good defender by the end of the year. And now you had DeJounte Murray. That's very exciting to me. So, look, I think this is a great fit. I think you gave up no major assets here. I think this is a very exciting move by David Griffin and Bryson Graham, the brand new 37-year-old GM. But there's still work to be done. Taylor, what was your initial reaction to the Murray trade?
I loved it because, like you said at the beginning of the show on Friday, I kind of, teased this a little bit, but I thought they were going to trade Brandon Ingram for DeJounte Murray. I mean, I thought that's the type of caliber player you were going to have to trade to get him. I mean, you trade Larry Nance Jr. and a couple role players for an all-star. I think that's the most important part of this trade because you still have Ingram. If you get things to work out for him, great. Like, hand up, I want him in New Orleans. I love Brandon Ingram. But if you do have to trade him, you need that big. Now you trade Brandon Ingram for a big. There is a lot more options out there now because you held on to him and were still able to get Murray.
Yeah, it's a very good point. And that's unfortunately probably what's going to happen with Brandon Ingram. Now, David Griffin had a very interesting quote on Ingram on Wednesday saying, Brandon wants to stay here. He believes in what we are building. That is meaningful to us. That's meaningful to him. That's meaningful to his agent. At the same time, there's a financial reality that we all deal with. I think we're excited about Brandon. We know he's excited about us. Usually these things yield good results one way or another. That's a lot of niceties with just no real substance in terms of commitment, right? That is clearly telling you that everybody likes each other, but that they are at an impasse a bit financially. Let me present you with a hypothetical. What if Brandon Ingram was willing to take a very team-friendly deal? Do you try to keep him and make him work, or do you still move him again? Because as chat's asking right now, who's going to be the rim protector? Who's going to be the center? That's what you still need, and Ingram does represent your greatest chip to acquiring that need.
I think you have to move him at this point. Again, I love Brandon Ingram, but you have a lot of wing players. Herb Jones can play the wing. We've seen Trey Murphy be able to do it. If you go look at free agency right now that Valanciunas is signed, I mean, Andre Drummond, Mohamed Bamba. I mean, do those names excite you? I mean, those are the guys out there that you'd have to sign if you do not trade for at least a competent starting big man. At this point, you got to get rid of him, I think.
Yeah, and I know that I doubt there's any movement here. Jared Allen from Memphis is somebody they've been trying to pry away for a while now. I don't know that Memphis would what would you have to give it up as well as it just feels like Memphis would want a lot for that on top of Ingram, but it is a bit of a bummer though, because I do believe that Brandon Ingram genuinely enjoys being in New Orleans, and that was not the case. Players did not enjoy being in New Orleans when he got here, and I think that perception has changed. I think guys like C.J. McCollum did a lot to change that, but I think Brandon Ingram probably did some of the most, coming here, making himself into an all-star, but unfortunately this is just the reality of the business. So they absolutely still need a center. Might need a couple with Larry Nance now gone as well, and I'll be interested to see how Bryson Graham checks that box, the new GM. By the way, Bryson Graham, just 37 years old, and there's a great write-up on his story in the Advocate from over the weekend. I believe Rod Walker did it, but 15 years ago, Bryson Graham's first day of work, an intern for the Hornets, he's unloading boxes in the Hilario Center in West Wego. Now, 15 years later, he's guiding the Pelicans through an NBA draft, trading for all-stars without giving up any starters, and now going to seek to take this roster to the next level and fill the final holes and make a run at what should be a very tough Western Conference next season.